big news today out of the Middle East. You have a top Iranian general was just killed in what appears to have been an Israeli airstrike. All the news outlets are saying it was Israel that did this. An Israeli airstrike killing a top Iranian general, targeting a building right nearby the Iranian embassy in Damascus, Syria. Axios with this report, two sources familiar. The general Mohammad Reza Zahidi was the commander of the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Doesn't get much higher than that. The Quds Force in Syria and Lebanon, and a key official here. The Iranians are promising a big response. For more on this, I want to bring in Gabriel Noronha now, who is the executive director of Polaris National Security and a former State Department advisor on Iran. Gabriel, good to have you with us, sir.
Hey, Vince, always great to be on.
What kind of a scalp is this? I mean, it seems like it's a big deal, this guy that apparently Israel just took out.
This is one of the biggest scalps that Israel has taken really in years. This is not quite Soleimani level, but this is sort of 1 degree right below. This is almost like a 4-star commander for them. He is in charge of anything Israel related, Lebanon, Syria. They also killed 3 other top commanders and generals, including one responsible for the Gaza Strip. So again, these are top brass that just got taken out. These are all their top terror generals. And I think it's fair to say Iran is not happy about this. They've made some pretty strongly worded threats in response.
So when Soleimani was taken out, they had a relatively minor response, kind of a show of force, but it didn't go much further beyond that. How disabling is it to take out one of these big time Iranian generals? Are they so powerful that it does cause meaningful chaos for the Iranians?
I mean, this guy has been in charge of these forces for about 15 years now, maybe a little bit more. So this guy has all the institutional memory, all the relationships, highly trusted figure, and pretty powerful in the region. So you can't just replace him with the guy below him. You're going to have serious problems underneath. In terms of what does Iran respond with, look, they've already been throwing almost everything they can against Israel. They were sponsoring Hamas, the October 7th attacks. So, we're probably going to see a little bit less of like a show of missiles against Israel and more just sort of this escalation and constant attacks that we've always been seeing.
Right. And as we see the fighting continuing between Hamas and Israel, we should understand that as an expression of Iranian aggression, right? The Hamas is funded by the Iranians. They're arming Hamas. This is obviously an extension of Iranian terror.
Exactly. 93% of Hamas's military budget comes directly from Iran. This is just another appendage of the regime. I heard a lot of people saying online that this was, a major escalation by Israel. I don't think that's accurate. Look, Iran and its proxies have been attacking Israel nonstop for the past 6 months. This is, in my view, an appropriate response. This is sort of saying, we're going to hold you, Iran, responsible for the actions of your proxies. You don't get away with killing hundreds, thousands of Israelis and expect to go get away with that.
So the question is, does Iran respond in a way that is good? I mean, like, do they respond to that? Like, obviously, they're going to make a lot of hay in public and say, oh, we're going to get tougher now. Oh, we're going to have a big response now. Oh, it's really coming for Israel now. But is this the kind of thing that actually brings them to heel? Does it slow Iran down or give them pause?
The way I think about this is Israel has just killed sort of one of their family members, in the sense that this is one of their insiders. This is someone who everyone in the top regime leadership knows and likes and has been around. So you're also going to see a little bit of an emotional reaction out of the regime. You could see them lash out. You're going to see probably some missiles come in from Lebanon. But again, if they thought that they could win in a all-out war with Israel, they would have done that war a long time ago. They realize that they are outmatched. So there's a limit to what you're going to see. I think you're going to see something dramatic, perhaps, but that, again, takes the temperature down because at the end of the day, they can't win in a full-out war.
Let me move now to Joe Biden and his attitudes towards Israel. In the wake of the terror attack on October 7th, Biden came out and made a lot of statements demonstrating, or at least suggesting, that he was very supportive of Israel. But since that time, many in his party, and now him for that matter, have all decided that actually Israel's sort of a problem for them politically. Expressing support even for Israel is problematic for Democrat electoral chances, especially in places like Michigan. And so many Democrats have begun abandoning their pro-Israel sentiment and including their support. And this past week, you had a vote in the United Nations Security Council, a resolution calling for a 6-week, quote, immediate ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. This has largely been seen by, I think, everyone as only to Hamas's benefit, so that they can re-up their efforts to strike Israel yet again. And the United States, for the first time, didn't veto it. Now, traditionally, the U.S. apparently vetoes these things. Didn't last week. Tell us about the message that sends.
So it's interesting. In the early days of this war, you had senior Biden officials saying publicly that a ceasefire is simply a mechanism which allows Hamas to survive and attack Israel again. And they were very clear about this. They were clear-eyed. They knew the strategic implications. And so what we've seen here is a complete 180 on that policy. They are abandoning something that they know would only lead to Hamas being able to attack Israelis again. So you've got this right. This is about Michigan, much less than what it is about in Israel. I think it's truly a catastrophe when you see the Biden administration abandoning an ally just because they think that can win a few more votes for re-election. That sends a terrible message to our allies across the rest of the world that, hey, if you become a liability for our re-election chances, we're throwing you over the board.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we all want to see the fighting come to an end and people stop dying. And it's being sold as a, quote, ceasefire. So I think as a top line, I think most people would agree, like, boy, I really hope there's a ceasefire. But is it your view, Gabriel, that that a ceasefire would only redound to the benefit of Hamas and that they would literally only use it for more death and destruction?
So Hamas leadership has been pretty clear about this answer themselves. What they have said is, we want to do October 7th a second time, a third time, a fourth time, as long as it takes to kill all the Jews, is what they have said, and that's basically verbatim. So how Hamas would use a ceasefire is they would be able to regather their troops. They are split across Gaza. They are low on supplies. They need a respite from sort of the constant Israeli bombardment of them, and they need to do that so that they can go and launch more attacks. If they get a ceasefire, they are able to do that. That's why they've been pushing for a ceasefire so aggressively. What the Biden administration has said is they want a lasting and permanent ceasefire. That is basically peace. That's sort of like us saying after 9/11, hey, Al-Qaeda can get a permanent ceasefire. We know what would happen after that. Hamas has had ceasefire after ceasefire over the last few decades, and each time they're the ones that break it with a new attack against Israel.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. That just keeps happening. I've noticed that a lot of the Biden administration antipathy towards Israel is very focused on Benjamin Netanyahu. They're like, you know who the bad guy is. It's Benjamin Netanyahu specifically. But I'm struggling to see how Israeli policy would be any different here if Benjamin Netanyahu was not in charge. I mean, my impression is that the Israeli people are very much against terrorist attacks from Hamas and support the military effort in Gaza. What am I getting wrong?
They absolutely do. And they actually have a war cabinet right now, which includes all of Netanyahu's major rivals from his own party. The left in Israel has sort of collapsed politically since the 7th. So there are no real opposition. And 2/3 of Israelis say that they are strongly supportive of Netanyahu's policies here. So this isn't an attack against Netanyahu. It's really an attack against the entire Israeli system disguised as an attack on Netanyahu. I think of the way they've got this relationship, it's a little bit like we have Trump derangement syndrome over here. They've got Netanyahu derangement syndrome, where they're sort of obsessed with the personality, and they just don't like the personality, and so they make really bad policy decisions just to try, even out their spite here. and it's
Right.
not productive for U.S. national security at all.
At the State of the Union, Biden announced that the United States military would be setting up a mobile dock, basically, to deliver aid into Gaza, which, of course, is, as we know, controlled by Hamas. We would deliver all sorts of humanitarian aid there. And now I'm seeing increasing concerns that all this is doing is just putting American troops needlessly in harm's way, and thus potentially running the risk of escalating this into a U.S. troop-involved war. What are your thoughts on what the Biden administration is currently trying to do in Gaza?
Look, there's always been the aversion in America to having military boots on the ground in wars that we're not a party to.
Right.
This is the closest thing that you can have to boots on the ground. We are putting a bunch of American soldiers right up to Gaza. You know, we should all remember, and this predates us a bit, but the USS Cole, this was 2000, was stationed, and Al-Qaeda rammed suicide boats laden with explosives into
Yes.
the USS Cole, killed huge numbers of sailors. This is the kind of thing that would be very, very easy for Hamas to go and take a pot shot at us. We could see mass casualties. You know, there's a strong desire on behalf of Israel and the United States to get humanitarian aid into Gaza. The best way to do that is through the land borders. I think this sea-based approach is a little misguided and has a huge potential to go devastatingly wrong.
Right. And there's no shortage of efforts to try and get aid into Gaza. But, you know, to the extent that we face barriers to doing that, what are those? I mean, I imagine that includes in part definitely Hamas and the history of theft of aid for their own enrichment. Additionally, you know, what is Egypt doing to help deliver aid into Gaza, given that they border it?
So there's the big main entrance into Gaza for humanitarian goods is called the Rafah Gate. It's in Rafah in the south of Gaza. That's the border with Egypt. And right now, Israel is scanning and monitoring about 200, maybe 250 trucks a day of aid that's going into Gaza. The issue and sort of the roadblock here is actually once they get into Gaza, of being able to get distributed among the people without Hamas either attacking these trucks or taking them over and stealing it. So it's really it's not everyone's blaming Israel as they want to do, but Israel's not where the impediment is. It's actually the UN inside Gaza, the humanitarian arrangements inside. That's where we've had the biggest issue, and so solving that roadblock and getting Hamas to not attack them is really where you need to see the most improvement.
Man, it's just so wild. Gabriel Noronha, again, with Polaris National Security, a former State Department advisor on Iran as well. Thank you, sir, for your insight into this topic, as always. Really appreciate your time today.